In the unusual African kingdom of Eswatini, there is a strict rule that subjects must avoid dishonoring their monarch, King Mswati III. This rule extends to his 15 wives, but one of the king's wives broke it in a scandal that sent shockwaves through the nation. She was caught in the act with the king's best friend, who also happened to be Eswatini's Minister of Justice. So how did King Mswati respond to this humiliation? And what fate awaited the lovers involved? Let's dive into the details of this scandal and find out how it all ended. Eswatini, a small country in southern Africa, has a population of just over 1 million people. In 1968, the country, then known as Swaziland, gained independence from England. The local tribal chief, Sobhuza II, declared himself king and held absolute power. After his death in 1986, his 18-year-old son, Mswati III, ascended the throne, and he still rules Eswatini as an absolute monarch with vast powers, including the ability to execute and pardon, dispose of land, and even determine the fate of his subjects. One of the ways Mswati exercises his power is through his private life. The king has 15 official wives, 23 children, and an informal harem, which he has carefully curated. His subjects consider him relatively modest compared to his father, King Sobhuza II, who had 70 wives, 210 children, and over 1,000 grandchildren. Mswati's reign began with two prominent characteristics: amorousness and greed. He established the Sovereign Wealth Fund, where every citizen had to contribute money in addition to their taxes. With this fund, the king built his harem, selecting the most beautiful girls from across the country. Given that Eswatini is a relatively poor nation, many women readily accepted the king's offers. Over the course of his reign, the number of Mswati's official wives grew to 11. There were rumors and gossip, with some suggesting that not all of the women joined the harem voluntarily. The king himself publicly stated that he not only owned the wealth of Eswatini, but also all the women in the country. Those who refused to become his wives could even be kidnapped. However, one young woman named Notondo didn't need to be forced to live with him. What happened next in this scandalous tale? Stay tuned to find out how King Mswati dealt with this betrayal and what happened to the lovers who dared to defy his authority. The story of her relationship with the king was also very controversial. In fact, Notondo was a teenager when their relationship began. She met the king after winning the Miss Teenager 2004 beauty contest. The king, who was much older, took notice of her. At the time, she was about 16, and the king was already 36. Despite the big age gap, Notondo welcomed his attention. Their relationship wasn't exactly romantic. It followed a pattern the king had used before: giving attention, expensive gifts, promises of a better life, and eventually offering to make her his 12th wife. Notondo came from a poor family, even by the standards of Eswatini. So, a year after they met, she agreed to become one of his wives. The king paid her family a large amount of money in the form of cattle. In 2005, they had a big wedding in Eswatini's capital, Mbabane. However, shortly after the wedding, there was almost a revolt in the country. This happened because 4 years before the wedding, a law was passed that seemed strange to Europeans. To fight AIDS, the king imposed a 5-year ban on intimate relations with virgins. Girls who were still virgins had to wear special tassels on their clothes. Surprisingly, most people in Eswatini followed this law because they are very respectful of rules. The local girls who had followed the rule and stayed virgins were extremely upset. They organized a protest march to the king's palace and threw the tassels from their clothes onto the porch. The king quickly had to cancel the rule and pay a fine of 1 cow for breaking his own law. The cow was roasted and served to the cheering crowd, but the king's reputation was damaged. His popularity continued to drop because he lived a lavish life while most of his people lived in poverty. He sold rights to foreign companies to develop valuable resources in the country, while his citizens were struggling to survive on just 70 cents a day. The king's treatment of his wives was also bad. His 5th and 6th wives ran away to South Africa and told the media about the terrible conditions in the palace. They claimed that the king often beat and insulted them. The 9th wife, Lamagongo, was not allowed to attend her sister's funeral, and she was so upset that she took her own life. After his honeymoon with Notondo, the king quickly lost interest in her as well. Soon, he was marrying for the 13th and 14th time, nearly forgetting about his previous wives. As the years went by, Notondo grew increasingly unhappy in her marriage and could no longer tolerate the situation. Her feelings of loneliness caught the attention of one of the wealthiest men in the country, Ndumiso Mambo, the Minister of Justice. He had been a childhood friend of King Mswati and likely felt untouchable because of their close relationship. Unlike the king, Ndumiso was well-educated, charming, and treated Notondo with kindness and respect. She responded to his advances, and the two began a passionate affair. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret because King Mswati strongly disapproved of unfaithful wives. To maintain their privacy, the couple would meet in secret at the luxurious Royal Villa Hotel, located near the palace. To avoid detection, Notondo would dress in a men's military uniform and travel from the palace to the hotel in disguise. However, they underestimated the king's network of informants, who were everywhere in the small country. It didn't take long before Mswati found out about the affair between his wife and the Minister of Justice. His response was swift and severe. Despite his long-standing friendship with Ndumiso, the king had him arrested for trespassing on private property. The Royal Villa Hotel, where the affair took place, was owned by the king, so technically, the claim against the Minister of Justice was legitimate. Instead of being interrogated by the police, the minister was questioned by the king's bodyguards. They brutally beat him, knocking out almost all of his teeth. Afterward, a show trial was held. The king initially wanted to execute the minister for his betrayal, but pressure from Britain and other European nations forced him to cancel the execution. Although Eswatini is an independent country, it is still heavily influenced by the opinions of its international allies. King Mswati had even attended the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton as a guest of honor. In the end, Ndumiso was removed from his high-ranking position, had all of his property taken away, and was banned from any further work in the government. The once powerful minister ended up homeless and nearly destitute, but at least he survived. As for Notondo, her fate was much worse. Initially, the king appeared to forgive her for her infidelity and even allowed her to continue living in the palace. However, over time, as the king married more wives, his attitude toward her worsened. Eventually, Notondo was removed from the women's quarters and sent to live with the palace guards. It seemed as though her future had been sealed in a much more tragic way. The tragic story of Notondo's life and death is deeply troubling. From a young age, she was entangled in a relationship with a powerful man who used his position and wealth to control her. It's heartbreaking to think that she had to endure so much pain, especially considering how her life unfolded. From the early days of being lured into the king's world with promises of wealth to later facing such cruelty. Whether her death was truly from illness or something more sinister, as the rumors suggest, it's clear that the circumstances surrounding her life and death were far from normal or fair. The question of what will happen to the next monarch of Eswatini is also significant. The legacy of mistreatment of women and corruption under King Mswati raises concerns about whether future rulers will continue these practices. If the heir is indeed a child of the current king, it's uncertain whether he will follow in his father's footsteps or break away from such a troubled history. But it is important for the people of Eswatini and the wider international community to keep an eye on these issues and work toward ensuring that women, as well as the people of the country, are treated with dignity and respect moving forward. Ultimately, this story is a reminder of the impact that power, inequality, and abuse can have on individuals, particularly those who are vulnerable. It's crucial for societies to address these injustices to prevent similar tragedies in the future. What do you think about the story?